Sometimes one server just isn't enough. That's why in this video, I'm going to show you how you can set up replication with MySQL. Now, thankfully, replication isn't that hard to set up if you already have your SQL servers configured. You can get this taken care of in a matter of minutes. So stick around if you want to see how I do this. Now, if you want a really easy way to get replication working, you can skip ahead to the end of the video where I show you how PlanetScale handles the replication setup for you automatically. But if you want to first see how to do it the old-fashioned way, stick around in this video. A replica server is one that, well, replicates everything from the primary MySQL database instance. What you can do is set your system up where you have one primary server and then either one or many replicas which mirror the contents from the primary. What you can then do is have your primary server handle the write traffic, such as inserts and updates, and then you can have your replicas handle read traffic, such as select statements. I've gone ahead and set up a couple of virtual servers that I'm going to use to show you how to get this set up for this video. I've set up one for the primary, and I've already got MySQL installed, one for the replica, and I've already got MySQL installed, and I've set up a third server that I can use to test connections to the primary and replica. So let's jump in and take a look at how this gets configured. Okay, so I'm going to jump into this primary server that I have, and I've already got MySQL installed, like I said, so I need to do a couple things to configure it. So one of the things I'm going to do off the bat here is make it so that I can connect on the MySQL port. Okay, so that's just to make sure that later on when I'm starting to make connections to the server from other servers, I can do that. Now, the next step is I need to change a couple of things in the configuration file to make sure that I can, let's see, what do I want here? Conf, and then MySQL conf. Okay, so I need to change a couple things in this configuration file here. So one of them is I'm just going to comment out this bind address line. I'm going to go to the server ID, and in a replication environment, you want to make sure all of your servers have an ID. So I'm going to leave this, since this is a primary, as the default of 1. And then I'm going to go to the log bin and make sure and enable that. And I'm going to tell it which database I want to do replication on. And I'm going to make a database called chat. And that is going to be my replication database for this example. So now that I've got that figured out, I need to make sure and restart MySQL. So I'm going to say, etc. init, and then MySQL restart. Make sure it restarts that service. Okay, so now I can say MySQL-u root, and I can get in and do a couple of configuration options here. So what I want to do in particular is go ahead and create a user that's going to be designated as the replication user. So I'm going to say create user. I'm going to give it a name of replication. And then what I need over here is the IP address, which I'm going to grab, of my replica. So the IP address is this right here. So that user on that host, and then identified with MySQL native password. And then I'm going to select a password. And for this example, I'm just going to give it password as the password. But of course, you should probably select something more secure than that. And then I'm going to grant replication. And then that IP address again. And yeah, that's what I need. Okay, great. And then finally, I'm going to flush privileges on there. Oh, be able to spell. Okay, great. Privileges flushed. Okay, so now what I need to make sure and do is show master status. And this tells me where the MySQL binary log file is, because the replication is happening via the binary log. And it also shows me the position, which I'm going to need both of those bits of information when I go to the replica to set that up. So from here, I have that information. I can say exit, exit, and then I'm going to go over to the replica to get that configured. Now, I should point out here that if you have an existing database that you want to replicate onto a new replica server, you can do that. What you would do is take a MySQL dump on the primary, send that file over to the replica, and then load that in, and then you can start up replication. I'm not going to show those steps here, but that is a possible way of doing things. Next up, I need to get the replica properly configured so that it can begin replicating from that primary. So now I'm going to go down to this replica terminal, and again, I'm going to open up the configuration file. So that's in here. MySQL, MySQL conf, and then MySQL d conf. Okay, So in here, I'm going to set up a couple of things. I'm going to also give this server an ID, but of course I want to give it a different identifier, so I'm just going to use the number 2. I also want to enable the log bin. I need to tell it what database to use. So it's going to be the chat database. And then lastly, I'm also going to set up the relay log. And so I need to specify where the relay log should go to in here. And so this is going to be slash, let's see, I'll use var log MySQL, and I'll just call this relay.log. So relay. Okay, so I've given it all of the configuration options that it should need. And then I'm also going to restart here. So etc. init MySQL restart. Okay, so now again, MySQL-u root, and this is on the replica. So now I need to configure a couple of things, and in particular, I need to give this all of the information it needs to know to where to connect to do replication. So I'm going to say replication source to source user, and I need to basically give it a bunch of things. So the source user is replication, that's the one I created earlier. Source password. It's just password. Again, you should choose a more secure login information than that. Source host, I'm going to grab the IP address of the primary and put that in here. That's where to grab that information from. And then what else do I need to give it? I need to give it the source log file, which that's actually up here. Oh, I need to say MySQL-u root, and then I will show master status. There we go. So this is the name of the log file, and then source log position, and this is the number there. Okay. Oh, so it didn't like something. Oh, I just spelled replication wrong. Okay, there we go. So I've now configured that primary and told it all of the information about kind of where to connect to and what to do for the replication. And then I can simply say start replica, and it will begin doing replication. And I can say show replica status to get some information. And it shows here replica has read all relay log, waiting for more updates. And up here at the top, it says waiting for source to send event. So now it's time to see if the replication is actually working between these two servers. Now what I'm going to do is in the primary, I'm going to create a database called chat, and that's the one that I told it to replicate. I say show databases, and it shows chat there. And now down here, if I say show databases, it also shows chat. So the secondary replicated that. I'm going to say use chat, and I'm going to say create table, and I'll do an example table to test with. So message. In this, I can place an ID in there as an int. Just for simplicity, I'll leave it like that. And then I'll say text for the message and varchar 500. Now, of course, in a real chat message server, oh, let's see. What is it not like? Oh, I'm just making typos. There we go, create table. So of course, a real message table, you'd want a lot more information than that, but this is just for testing purposes. So I'll say explain message. And then down in the replica, I'll say use chat and explain message. And that table exists on both servers. And so if I do an insert, and I can say 1 and test for that example message, and then I can do down here, select star from message. And the replica has replicated that row through this replication process that I've set up, right? So this is really cool. I have 2 MySQL servers running. One is the primary, and one is basically mirroring all of the changes that happen from the primary onto the replica. And this is really cool because now what I can do is if I have an app server, I can set it up to make some of the connections to the primary, but make some of the reading connections to this replica, and that can spread the load out to allow me to scale up to handle more demand. So now I have a terminal open with my third server, and what I'm going to try and do and see if I can make a connection to that primary server. So that's the IP of the primary. And if I try to do this, it says it's not allowed to connect to that server. And this is because I need to do a little bit more configuration to get the connection to work. And one of the things that I'm going to do initially is really just create a user for this connection. So I'm going to create an other user, and I'll just allow this, may not be the most secure, but to go to any host. And then the password, again, is just going to be kind of an insecure password, but I'll just leave it like that. Okay, so then again, grant all privileges, not the most secure, but this is just for testing purposes here. So now if I try to make this connection yet again, I need to change my user to other, and then I also need to specify that I'm going to give a password. So now I can make a connection to it, and I can say show databases, and it shows that chat database on there. So I'm making a connection to the primary. But then what do I do if I want to make a connection to the replica instead? So if I go and try to make a connection to the replica IP address, it is going to fail. And there's a few things that need to get configured on this replica. So one of them is to make sure and not have this specific bind address in here. So I'm going to comment out this like I had done on the primary before. I'm going to also run this command here to allow access on that port, which I had actually already run earlier. And then from here, I'm going to try and see, and I actually already granted privileges to that user on the replica as well. So now if I do this, and run with the password, cannot connect. Oh, I need to restart. So I need to restart after changing that configuration file. And now it should let me connect to the replica. I can say show databases, and there's the chat database. So from your application server, you could make a connection to either the primary or a replica. Now, it's really cool to be able to know how to set up these replication systems manually, but if you use a platform like PlanetScale, it handles setting up the replication for you, which is great. So I'm going to show you how you can create a database in PlanetScale and use one of the replicas. So if you go in the interface and do create a new database, you can select the database name. So I'm going to call this replication example. Actually, just going to make that one there. And then you can select a Scalar Pro plan, just the lowest one for this example, and I'm going to hit create database. So I can do that later. And then it's going to take a little bit to initialize. But once this initializes, it will show you that there's a primary and it actually creates two replicas for you. So let's come back once that part is finished. Okay, so the database has finished getting set up. And as you can see from the diagram, there is a primary and then there are two replicas that have been configured. So I can connect to this PlanetScale database and I can actually choose whether I want to connect to the primary, which is the default, or specify that I want to connect to a replica and run a query there. So over here in the other server, I've already installed the PlanetScale command line interface and I've already done an auth login. So what I'm going to do is use pscale connect to make a connection to the server. I'm going to use port 4000. And I'm going to tell it my org is video, replication example is the database, and main is the branch, and I'm going to run that in the background. So it's going to open up that connection, and then using the MySQL command line, I can say host 127.0.0.1, the port of 4000, and this will make a connection to that PlanetScale database. Notice here it says that address and that port. And then I'm going to say replication example. And it makes a connection to that database, and I already went ahead and created the messages table. So if I say show tables, it has message, and I can say select star from message and get one row out of it. So this is making a connection to the primary by default, but what I can do is I can either say use replica here, use replica, and this will change it so that it will forward my future requests to the replica. So when I do this again, it should be forwarding that to the replica. Or I can actually just add @replica to the name of the database when I go to connect. And then it will send further requests that I would make here to that database. So I could say select star from message. And that query gets handled by the replica instead of the primary. So super simple to set up. In fact, there's really not much you have to do. PlanetScale does it for you, and super easy to pick which database you're going to connect to, a primary or a replica. If you made it this far, congratulations. You learned something useful about MySQL and about replication and about planet scale and about how to connect to the primary and the replica. I hope you can take this and use it to help you solve database problems, or just use it as kind of useful, fun information to know. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.